Wu Mumming was woken up by the cold. He was still in the flames of the explosion in the laboratory just a moment ago, but he was woken up by the freeze at this moment. Like every starting point male protagonist, he woke up in an orphanage. But he was worse. He woke up in the grocery room of the orphanage. Apart from the muddy floor and the dust floating in the air, he was accompanied only by a musty wooden barrel and a mop with black fungus. Wu Mumming tried to move his fingers a little stiffly, only to feel the pain as if being minced by a meat grinder spread from the deepest part of his soul to his whole body, which stimulated his whole body to shiver, and a lot of musty and dusty air poured into him. In his lungs, Wu Mumming greedily breathed in the air while coughing, feeling his body slowly warming up. Accompanied by rapid breathing and violent coughing, countless fragments of memories emerged from his brain. Wu Mumming was originally a brilliant young man in the 21st century, but when he stayed up all night doing experiments, he happened to encounter a laboratory explosion. He didn't die in the explosion, but the explosion collapsed the floor, and a 1 at an ultra-low temperature refrigerator fell into the air. Wu Mumming died suddenly on the spot. It doesn't hurt. The dead thief is peaceful. Then he woke up in this grocery room. Interestingly, this body is also called Wu Mumming. The English name is Tierra Wu. Tierra Wu, just like him, was born on June 28, 1980, has the same parents and the same appearance as him. But the only difference is that Wu Mumming's parents immigrated to the UK with unrealistic exotic dreams during the immigration wave in the 1980s. A week after the plane landed, he was shot in a dark alley next to the theatre. Miserable, really miserable. Wu Mumming here was also sent directly to the orphanage and died of hypothermia at night an hour ago. In the 1980s, discrimination against Chinese was still quite serious. This kind of discrimination is reflected in all aspects: schools, work units, government agencies, restaurants, and of course, orphanages are no exception. And sometimes, this kind of discrimination between young children is even worse and more blatant. Among the group of blonde orphans, you are the only one with black hair and black eyes. Who do you bully if you don't bully? From the very beginning, from being robbed of food and toys, to being found fault with, being pushed and beaten, and now being locked in the utility room after being poured cold water in a mischievous manner. Tierra Wu, who was not in good health, died of hypothermia at night. After lying on the ground for a while, Wu Mumming, or Tierra, sat up slowly, his right hand slowly resting on his left wrist, and silently counted for 60 seconds. The heartbeat is fine. Tierra majored in biology and medicine in her last life. Although she was not a pure medical student, she still knew some simple medical methods. Hey! After getting her pulse, Tierra realized that there was a ring on her left ring finger that obviously didn't match his current status. This is. There were no windows in the utility room, the door was closed, it was time to turn off the lights again, and the surroundings were pitch black, so Tierra had to fumble with her right hand. This ring feels a bit like it was carved out of some kind of bone. The ring was a circle larger than his ring finger, and it was uneven, as if some pattern was engraved, and the pattern was densely covered all over the ring. In the dark, other human senses will be magnified. Tierra touched it back and forth 2 times before she could barely identify these patterns that she would never notice at all. They seemed to be extremely distorted English words. Th. Mare, L, Eas, Gol, La. Ei, Lin. Tierra tried to read the words according to the spacing between the patterns and the English pronunciation. When the last syllable was blurted out, Tierra, who was in the clutter, suddenly disappeared, as if being erased by an eraser. The next moment, Tierra's eyes lit up and she appeared in a dimly lit library. Yuck! Although Tierra's stomach was empty, she couldn't help retching. It was as disgusting as if she had been on a roller coaster for 5 hours straight. Tierra lay on the ground weakly like a dead dog. After the feeling subsided a little, he rolled over and lay on the ground with his face flushed. What Tierra saw was a very wide ceiling that was far away from him. Below the ceiling was a very neatly corrected stone wall, which became smaller and smaller. Even when Tierra was on the ground floor, it was nearly 500 square meters in size. It is an inverted pyramid-shaped building. It is roughly estimated that it has at least 1,000 floors, each floor is only half a person high, and each floor is hollow. It was cluttered with various books and scrolls. After regaining a little strength, Tierra sat up, and then he saw that there was a very simple wooden table beside him, on which were piled rolls of parchment and a lamp made of strange stones. Composition of table lamps. Wu Mumming slowly climbed to the wooden table and sat directly on the wooden chair in front of the wooden table. The parchment paper on the table was very messy, and some were even torn and crumpled into of paper. Tierra picked up a piece of parchment at random, and it was covered with densely distorted words. It was a bit like English, but not exactly the same. After staring at it for a while, Wu Mumming felt dizzy. But when his fingers touched the words, a shuddering message flooded into his brain. In all the universes and all beings, except for those gods and descendants that were propagated by the Supreme Mother Goddess, there is no other being that can compare to. Tierra was so frightened that she quickly took her hand away. Then he went to touch another parchment with his fingers. The manly fruit that was knocked down by the thunderstorm, peeled, dried, crushed, and took 2 spoons. Tierra stared at the twisted words. He can be sure that he absolutely does not know these words, but when his fingers touch these words, the knowledge represented by these words will automatically enter his brain. After looking at a few pieces of parchment, Tierra faintly had a bad guess in her heart, and walked towards the grotto closest to him with a heavy face. Tierra's hand carefully slid across the spines of the books, one after another full of blasphemous, evil-feeling titles flowed into his brain. The largest and thickest book. The Necronomicon a little thinner, like an ordinary textbook. Book of Anonymous Sacrifices tall and lanky, wrapped in an unknown crusty shell. Lalei text a thin book, sewn with cotton thread like an ancient Chinese book. The 7th chapter of Suanjun. Whoosh, that ancient book flew out from the bookshelf and fell in front of Wu Mumming. The pages of the book automatically unfolded in front of Wu Mumming without wind. At this moment, Tierra never felt that Chinese characters were so scary and disgusting. He knew every word on it, and the moment his eyes touched the 2 pages of Chinese characters, all the hairs on Tierra's body stood up, as if some incomprehensible knowledge was forced into his soul. Confusion, the raving screams and incomprehensible images flooded his brain. The goosebumps all over the body came out one by one, and they got bigger and bigger, crowding and growing into translucent sticky pustules. Suddenly everything disappeared and everything returned to peace. Variation disappears. The frantic babbling and screaming disappeared. The incomprehensible picture disappeared. The scene in the library seems to have been switched to another scene by an unskilled editor. Tierra still kept her fingers touching the spine of the book, pointing her fingers at the Lalei text of the previous book of Suanjun 7 chapters secret scripture. Tierra was stunned for a few seconds, then retracted her fingers from the bookshelf as if being scalded by a hot soldering iron. He remembered everything just now. The secret book of Suanjun 7 chapters suddenly flew out of the bookshelf, crazy babble, incomprehensible pictures, and terrifying physical changes. Suddenly everything went back to a few seconds ago, when his fingers had not touched the secret book of Suanjun 7 chapters. Tierra gasped heavily, raised her left hand to wipe off the cold sweat. My hand. Tierra's left hand had only white bones where the pinky finger was originally. Although these phalanxes can be bent freely according to his will, it was obvious that his turn from danger to safety just now was not without cost. Tierra took a deep breath. What he was most worried about still happened. He did pass through. Not only that, he also traveled to the world of Thulhu. Just after he read the parchments, he felt a little puzzled about the words Supreme Goddess, God of Dreams, Crazy Twins and so on. Now he can be sure. It's really dangerous. Tierra couldn't help but let out a wry smile. I thought it was an urban soldier king, a business war overlord, etc. who came through, but I didn't expect it to be the Thulhu worldview, so I can only be honest." Having said this, Tiara was stunned for a moment. Something suddenly appeared in his mind. It is some kind of purest skill. It was as if he had rehearsed this skill thousands of times, and it was a skill that was ready to move at will. Tiara pointed her hand a little in the air. A black, hair-like filament grew from between his fingernails, getting longer and longer. When the filament grew to 10 centimeters long, it suddenly came out from under his fingernails and landed on the wooden table lightly. With the fall of this strand of hair, Tiara only felt light all over her body. Her mental dizziness and discomfort disappeared together with the old and new scars that he had been beaten on before he crossed over. Except that his stomach is still hungry, his current physical condition can be called healthy. But as the black filaments fell off, although Wu Muming's mental dizziness disappeared, he still felt a sluggish feeling. This skill is called Cursed Worm. At the same time, he obtained another skill called Communication Master of the Star Sea. Cursed worms can condense damage, disease, and curses on themselves or others into a worm with half-alive properties. This worm is best implanted within 24 hours of other beings, otherwise it will return again on yourself. This cursed worm has no way of deflecting physical hunger, exhaustion, and mental malaise. Another way to communicate with the Master of the Sea of Stars is to catch some rituals and project his soul into a designated Sea of Stars, so that he can obtain superhuman magic power. Of course, doing so is almost entirely giving oneself to the unknown evil being in the starry sky. In the world of Thulhu, greater power means greater danger. Communication with the Lord of the Star Sea can make people become gods on the spot, but at the same time, they can also make people die on the spot. Just like Wu Muming just now, if it weren't for that unknown power, he might have now become a mass of cells with no power and no self. Tiara decided to stop fumbling around, and turned her attention to the roll of parchment. The books in those grottos are really too dangerous. Although these parchments may also record taboo knowledge, in terms of probability, he is far less likely to die from reading the parchments than directly reading those books. But he couldn't help but read it. What's more terrifying than that knowledge is that he doesn't know anything, so he might break a taboo without knowing it. And through the random reading just now, he guessed that this should be something like the research journal of the former owner of this library. However, to be on the safe side, Tiara did not read the entire text, and only read the first and last paragraphs of each parchment, and only read the middle part bit by bit after confirming that there was no danger. This caused Tiara's reading speed to be greatly slowed down. For some parchments, he just looked at the beginning and passed them straight away, not because there might be danger, but at the beginning of those parchments, he knew at first glance that they were experimental records. As a science student, he did that. Judgment is still there. He is not in a hurry to look at the experimental records of the former owner, but needs to figure out where the place is and what taboos are there, so as not to accidentally overturn the car again. It took about 4 or 5 hours for Tiara to finish reading the 7 parchments, but she basically understood what was going on. The former owner of this library was named Merlin. It is the legendary British greatest magician Merlin. But this library was not built by Merlin. Merlin, like him, was also an outsider. Back then, he was just an ordinary rural boy. He accidentally fell into a valley while shepherding sheep. As the saying goes, if you don't die, you must have good luck, and there must be secrets under the cliff. Merlin found this inverted pyramid-shaped building when he was looking for a way out. He entered the library from the top of the inverted pyramid. From then on, a generation of legendary magicians was born. And this ring was refined after Merlin became famous. This is a space gate ring. When Merlin was more than 600 years old, Merlin moved this inverted pyramid library in a valley in England to tens of thousands of light years away, on a planet that is very similar to the Earth, and refined this space gate ring. As long as you hold the ring and roughly recite the incantation hidden in the ring inscription, you can travel to this library. According to Merlin's later research, he believed that the builder of this library should be the great ISS race. This was one of the earliest libraries built when they were still living on Earth. Dangerous knowledge of the great beings in the universe. Most of the books in this book are also from the great Yith race, and only a few of them come from Merlin's own collection. For example, the few hyperclay tablets placed in the grotto on the 3rd floor, and when printing was just emerging, he used to directly transfer a whole set of hardcover printed magic teaching materials. But of course, these books were completely new, Merlin had never read them, they were neatly stacked in the grotto opposite the wooden table, covered with dust. This library is completely hollowed out with a kind of black stone and hewn out bit by bit. The hardness of the stone itself is not very big, but it can inconceivably isolate the prying eyes of the old rulers other than the outer gods. As long as there is no active contact, the outer gods cannot influence any creatures inside the stone. This is why the great race of Yith chose to build this library inside this stone, which contains almost all the dangerous knowledge in the universe. According to Merlin's records, this stone belonged to another native race on the Earth at that time, a kind of intelligent crustacean high life similar to upright crabs. After the great Yith race discovered the magic of this stone, the two sides co-founded the library. But because the aborigines of the Earth at that time did not have the erudite knowledge of the great Yith race, this joint museum was blessed with 3 magical blessings by the great Yith race. One is called knowledge. Every intelligent life who visits this place can face knowledge directly through words. A kind of time, every intelligent life who has visited this place has the same number of opportunities to avoid madness as the fingers of one hand. There is also a kind of sacred, which comes from the sublimation of the stone itself, and any contaminated spirit cannot enter this library. These are the 3 great magics that have not dissipated even after countless years of hard work. And the reason for this setting? Because the race possessed by the great Yith race at that time had 7 fingers, their allies, the crustacean creatures like upright crabs, had pincers in both hands, and they counted as 2 fingers, while their mortal enemies, the flying worms, were not even a finger. But even so, the influence from the unspeakable existence cannot be completely eliminated. Some beings are independent of the 4th dimension, far beyond the limits of human comprehension. These 2 magical blessings, according to Merlin's guess, may have been used by the great Yith race to overcome research problems. Whenever a research reaches a dead end, the race of the great Yith will set up a ceremony outside the library to contact a great being in the universe, in most cases one of the 3 gods, Yog-Sothoth, the incarnation of Tavir at Umr. This outer god, who represents the benevolent side of Yog-Sothoth, sits on a boulder pedestal behind the first silver key gate in the ultimate abyss of the universe. He is happy to bestow endless knowledge on any beings who can pass through the silver key gate, as long as they can bear the weight of that knowledge. When the researchers of the great Yith race were driven mad by the incarnation of the one who returns to all things and went back in time, they would always leave a large amount of knowledge in their souls that could be accepted by themselves. Just like when Tiara was contacted by the outer corresponding to the secret book of 7 chapters of Suan Jun, he left 2 magical imprints in his soul. This kind of magical blessing called time can be saved except for facing Azathoth and the 3 pillars, or for dying and fighting against other god-level old rulers. In the eyes of the tyrants of the great Yith race, this ability is for the purpose of further exploring the truth of the world, not for saving their lives in the hands of the old rulers. It's a pity that Tiara wasted such an opportunity. However, Merlin is much more reckless than Tiara. Tiara comes from modern society after all. She took the postgraduate entrance examination last university and is familiar with the myth of Thulhu, so she only wasted 1 chance. At the beginning, Merlin started without 3 fingers. By the time he really understood what it all meant, it was too late. This also led to Merlin, the famous great magister, suffering from extremely serious mental pollution from the outer gods in his later years, so severe that he seemed to have completely transformed into another person in his later years, another crazy, cruel, and unreasonable humanoid monster. In the last time he was awake as Merlin, he wrote down the contents of the piece of parchment that Tiara was holding now. A wise man who does not belong to this time and space, a traveler from another world, I foretold your arrival. I try my best to stay awake and write the following words. Don't use up your 5 chances. Don't try to contact the great Yith race, at least until they are at the same latitude. You can choose the supreme goddess. If you can, please come to me. I put my coordinates on the IV bookshelf on the 4th floor, but please don't try it lightly until you get the latitude of divinity. If I take the initiative to contact you, hide in the library, I can't get in. After reading this paragraph, Tiara put her hands together silently. I hope people are all right. Don't get in touch with anything. Tiara rummaged through a few more pieces of parchment, this time not just reading the beginning, but reading the whole thing. Since Merlin predicted his arrival, then given the state of mind that Merlin was able to enter this library at that time, reading www.yuyuganshu.com should not leave any nasty things in its own notes. At least from this point of view, he can read with confidence. I have to say that the notes of a great magician are of great help to a rookie like him who is new to magic, especially Merlin himself has grown from a farm boy who does not know one big character to a great magician. From how to guide one's own magic power, to the essence of magic, almost everything is covered. Tiara stared at the parchment in her hand. Ujadili, Ozalia. Tiara chanted the incantation in her mind while gently loosening the parchment with both hands. The parchment seemed to pause in the air and then fell. This is the levitation spell recorded in Merlin's diary, the simplest and most suitable spell for beginners to use to guide their own magic power. Although Tiara successfully cast the curse worm before, the curse worm belongs to the instinct inscribed on the soul by the outer gods. Before he learned to guide his own magic power, the source of the curse worm came from his spiritual power, rather than relying on him of magic. Therefore, he also needs a simple magic to guide his own magical power. Ujadili, Ozalia. Tiara said aloud this time. The parchment in his hand seemed to have a tendency to break free, but after Tai stretched his hand, the parchment still fell. Ujadili, Ozalia. After about 40 or 50 attempts, the parchment in Tiara's hand finally floated in the air tremblingly. But after more than 10 seconds, the parchment still fell down quickly. And Tiara also felt a chill all over her body, and collapsed on the chair as if she was exhausted. After successfully channeling her own magic power, Tiara did not continue to stay in this library, and simply turned over the drawer of the wooden table, took out a slightly heavy stone cone, and followed the instructions in Merlin's notes. Recorded, recited the spell on the ring, and returned to the small utility room in the orphanage. Tiara, who successfully channeled her own magic power and established contact with the outer gods, was much better than when she came. After this return trip, she only felt dizzy, and she did not feel nauseated. The time when Tiara was locked in the utility room was about 9:30 p.m. During the bedtime prayers after the nuns checked the bed, Tiara was warmed by several naughty children. Pulled out of the bed, poured a head of cold water and shut it in the utility room. I don't know how long he stayed before waking up, but Tiara's bluish-white shimmer leaked in through the crack of the utility room door, and Tiara could estimate that it should be around 4 or 5 in the morning, when the sun just rose. Tiara picked up the stone cone and slammed it on the door lock of the utility room. 1 time, twice, 3 times, boom! Tiara only smashed 3 times, and smashed a hole out of the rotten and disrepaired wooden door. Tiara tiptoed out of the utility room. The time is now 4:26. The utility room is at the bottom of the stairs on the first floor of the orphanage. Turning outside is the reception hall of the orphanage. There is an old wall clock on the wall. At this time, both the nuns and the orphans were still sleeping in their dreams, and it was a good time for him to leave. Yes, leave. Although this orphanage has food, drink, and shelter, it also means bondage. He can't practice magic recklessly. An untrained magic apprentice without a teacher around him will have a great chance of losing control when using magic. The light ones might just destroy some cabinets and furniture, while the serious ones might directly cause an uncontrollable fire, which would be no less than a disaster for the orphanages that were not rich. Although Tiara didn't have a good impression of this orphanage, she couldn't have displaced hundreds of orphans just to practice magic by herself. But he couldn't give up magic. How could he, who had been an ordinary person for more than 20 years in his last life, give up the extraordinary power he had acquired, no matter how dangerous and crazy the road was? And he is just an orphan now, unlike his previous life with both parents and a well-off life, in this capitalist country where he is unfamiliar. Even if he has the knowledge attached to his previous life, he can go to a community college here. Confidence to make up for the high tuition fees of public universities for him. As the saying goes, how to pursue the truth of the universe without letting go of a comfortable life. Anyway, he has the library on the alien planet, at least he doesn't need to worry about accommodation for a short time after leaving the orphanage. And the library wasn't all books, there were a lot of items and instruments that Merlin brought in from the outside world. It was as if the grey and inconspicuous stone pyramid he used to smash open the wooden door of the utility room just now was the divine stone that Merlin picked up from the Celtic Holy Land, Avalon. It was a Celtic who was promoted to Druid. Engrave a natural crest on yourself, a key item for completing transfiguration sublimation. Used by Tiara to smash the door. Tiara found a blood-red gem, which was the sage's stone that Merlin failed to refine. A wooden staff with a height of more than half a person, also from Avalon, is a branch of the Celtic sacred tree, Merlin's early staff, but after Merlin became a great magician, except for some special ceremonies, it was very special. Used less. And some other miscellaneous things, Tiara plans to slowly distinguish later. In addition to these magic items, Wu Mumming also found 3 cowhide bags on the 3rd floor of the wooden table, which were filled with items from Merlin's time, in the 11th and 12th centuries, until the printing press became popular in Europe. All kinds of gold, silver, and copper coins from these are considered antiques, and pawning them in pawn shops can bring him a lot of economic benefits, which should be enough for him to persist for a long time. Tiara went back to her room, pushed open the door gently, and saw that her other roommates were fast asleep, so she crept in, quietly packed up her clothes, flyers, bedding, and rationing for the orphanage. The notebooks, pens, and inks that he had created were transferred to the alien library in batches for temporary storage, and then they were taken out after the world found a stable foothold. He didn't dare to live in the library for a long time, although under normal circumstances, the consciousness of the outer gods could not pass through the strange stones that constitute the library. UU reading www.uugonshu.com. But the sacred magic of the stone is not 100% guaranteed. According to Merlin's records, when a person is sleeping, spiritual power is most active, and it is extremely vulnerable to external influences. It's very possible that he got on the line with the outer god through an ancient book without knowing it. Tiara, who had packed her things, did not disturb others, went to the kitchen to get some bread and milk, and resolutely opened the door of the orphanage. I will be a wandering mage from now on. Tiara laughed at herself and looked back at the orphanage. In the early morning light, the rusted Wolves Orphanage above the gate of the orphanage sign. At that moment, Tiara had the urge to run back. He understood that when he left, he was facing a life of displacement that even adults could not endure. Although he has a mature soul and has no less than 100 ways to make money from the future, he is only a 6-year-old child, which limits many of his methods. Alas! Tiara walked towards the bus stop heading for the city center without looking back. Although the orphanage is very poor, it still gives pocket money to the orphans living in it every month. Although there are only a few coins at a time, it is enough for him to take a car to the pawn shop in the city center. Relying on the memory left by Tiara in this world, Tiara knew that there was a pawn shop in the city center next to the theater where his parents were shot. It's hard to get things done without money. First go get some money, eat something good, and then think about the future. Tiara, who had stayed up almost all night, was extremely exhausted both mentally and physically, and needed to replenish her energy. In May 1991, a mottled owl flew over the city of London with a letter in its mouth. At the same time, in a dilapidated attic in the old city of London, an 11-year-old Chinese boy was taking notes with a serious face. The boy's left hand in black gloves pressed lightly on the old and yellowed parchment, while the other hand quickly wrote and drew some very complex geometric figures on another blank parchment. After about 30 minutes, the Chinese-American boy finished his last strokes, leaned on the chair lightly, picked up a bottle of light blue liquid on the side of the table, and drank it. The Chinese-American boy, or Tiara, almost vomited out of the choking smell in the light blue liquid, but fortunately, he covered his mouth in time and forced himself to swallow it. The moment the blue liquid was swallowed, Tiara only felt as if she had returned to the night when the laboratory exploded. It stretched to eternity, the dull pain of the refrigerator hitting him, the severe pain of crushing his skull inch by inch, tormented him frame by frame. I don't know how long it took. Tiara woke up in a cold sweat from the hell-like torture, but his spirit was incomparably uplifted, as if he had woken up after a long and comfortable sleep. I feel hopeless when I think of continuing to drink in the future. Tiara sighed, lifted up the chair he kicked down while drinking the medicine, and went to the bathroom downstairs to take a hot shower. The potion Tiara had just drank was called Harris Potion. It was one of the research results in Merlin's diary. It could enhance mental power, and the remaining medicinal properties could build a temporary spiritual barrier for the user for about a month, which can effectively reduce the probability that the user accidentally aligns with the old ruler when learning forbidden spells. Of course, the side effects are also quite obvious. Within 10 minutes to half an hour of taking the medicine, the user will experience the most painful experience in his life over and over again. For Tiara, it was naturally the experience of being crushed to death by a freezer under an explosion. Although he didn't feel anything at the time, the pain was recorded by his subconscious mind, and it erupted in the illusion caused by Harris's pharmacy. After taking a shower, Tiara lay softly on the bed. Get ready to learn the next magic after a short rest. He has only one short day a week to learn magic without being affected, so he must hurry up. It has been 5 years since he left the orphanage. Although he has a huge sum of money in ancient coins, Tiara cautiously took out a few pawns in exchange for enough money to live on for nearly a month or two. Find a job. It's just that it's not easy for a 60-year-old to find a job. Either he rejects him outright, or someone with bad intentions wants to sell him into some underground places. Tiara, who has been out of work for a long time, has to learn from other street children in London who do petty thefts. However, this situation soon changed. During a burglary, he was stopped by a Chinese aunt who could not speak English, and after finding out that Tiara spoke much better English than her husband's, a generous, fat, and kind-hearted Chinese aunt offers Tiara a job as a cashier at her restaurant. She has room and board, 6 days off and 1 day off, with a monthly salary of £20. Her usual job is to sit at the cashier and translate what guests need to order. When she is busy, she may go to the back kitchen to help out. Now, the attic in this old town originally belonged to a friend of hers. The friend left it to her to take care of it for the time being when she returned to China. It was empty, so Tiara was just arranged to stay here. Most of the wages Tiara earned have been saved by herself. It didn't even cost much to make the Harris potion. After all, this library is not just a library, it is also located on a planet similar to the ecological environment of the Earth. With the entrance of the library as the center, Merlin has opened up more than 10 acres of herbal medicine field. Although Merlin has been away for nearly 500 or 600 years, most of the herbs are growing like wild grass because of the suitable climate here. Most of the materials for making Harris's potion were gathered, and the remaining small part was also collected in the Chinese medicine store in Chinatown. Knock, knock, Knock. Just when Tiara wanted to get up and learn another magic, there seemed to be a sound of knocking on the glass in his ear. A few seconds later, he saw a mottled owl with a paper letter in his mouth landed in front of his skylight and struck the glass 3 times with its short beak. Knock, knock, knock. Could it be? Thinking of some possibility, Tiara rolled over from the bed in excitement, and hurriedly picked up the iron rod to push up the skylight. After the mottled owl flew in and put the letter on Tiara's desk, it stood alone on the back of the chair and sorted its feathers. Tiara picked up the thin envelope, red stamped on a white background, with his name, address written in emerald green ink on the back, a wax seal on the front, a coat of arms, a capital H surrounded by a letter. A lion, a snake, an eagle, and a flat head. Tiara was a little excited and flattened the envelope, carefully using a paper cutter to cut off the part of the lacquer that was removed from the letter paper, and peeled off the whole piece of lacquer. Tiara took out the pungent ink-smelling letter from the envelope and read it carefully, word by word. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. President of the International Magic Federation, President of the Wizarding Association, First-Class Magician of the Merlin Order, dear Mr. Wu, we are pleased to inform you that you have been admitted to study at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Enclosed is a list of required books and equipment. The semester is scheduled to start on September 1st. We will be waiting for your reply from your owl by July 31st. Vice Principal, female, sincerely, Minerva McGonagall. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry uniform. First year freshman need, 1. 3 sets of plain work gowns, black, 2. A plain pointed hat, black, for day wear. 3. A pair of protective gloves, made of dragon skin or similar materials, 4. 1 winter cloak, black with silver buckle. Please note, all student clothing must be marked with a name tag. Textbook. All students are required to prepare the following books: Standard Spells, Elementary by Miranda Goshawk, A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot, The Theory of Magic by Adbel Wallen, The Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration, by M. Rees Witch, Thousands of Wonderful Herbs and Mushrooms by Phil Liddis Pole, Magic Potions and Potions by Arsenal Geiger, Monsters and Their Origin by Newt Scamander, Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Defense, by Quentin Tring. Other equipment: a magic wand, a large pot, made of pewter, standard size number 2, a set of glass or crystal vials, a telescope, a brass balance. Students may bring an owl or a cat or a toad. I would like to draw the attention of parents here. First-year students are not allowed to bring their own brooms. It's true, it's true. Tiara glanced at the owl standing on the table in a trance, causing the owl to flap its wings in annoyance. But Tiara's trance only lasted for a while. Immediately, he pulled out a piece of white paper, picked up a pen and wrote, "Dear Professor Dumbledore, it is a great honor to enter the Hogwarts Court of Witchcraft and Wizardry to learn magic. Reading www.uugonshu.com." After writing this sentence, Tiara thought for a while, and continued to write, "But I don't have anyone around me who has studied magic, and I'm very interested in magic, but I've never touched it, so I don't know how to prepare what's on the list or how to get to Hogwarts here. If I can, I mean if it is convenient for you, if any of the faculty members happen to live in London or work in London, can they lead me into the magical world of magicians by the way?" Student Tiara Wu folded the reply letter and handed it to Owl. But the owl didn't open its mouth. Instead, it waved its wings and called, and then stared at Tiara with a very humane look. "Oh, yes, you must be hungry when you fly here." Tiara only reacted when she saw the owl's movements. "Exactly, I have the delicious food you like here." After speaking, Tiara opened the door of the next floor and ran down. When she came back, she was carrying a plump squirrel with a somewhat mutilated tail in her hand. This is the drug rat that Tiara caught in the attic when she was practicing the floating charm. Now that it has been proved that the Hellas pharmacy is indeed useful, it is no longer needed, and it is simply given to the hard-working messenger as a snack. Squeak squeak! The squirrel was caught in his hands and screamed frantically, but unfortunately Tiara was holding the back of his neck, and it couldn't bite Tiara no matter how much tossed it. Tiara handed the squirrel to the owl's beak. The owl looked at the big mouse and then at Tiara. He pecked Tiara's hand, then took the letter in his mouth and flew away without looking back. Don't owls like to eat mice? Looking at the owl's back, Tiara said with some doubts. Do you want to eat it cooked? After sending the owl away, Tiara lay back on the bed. Knowing that she was in the Harry Potter world and there was another safer and safer magical path, Tiara felt less urgent about Merlin's path full of dangers and thorns. Moreover, there is a teacher to teach, why bother to buy yourself? If you are not careful, it will be another finger. Tiara put her hands behind her head and began to fantasize. I don't know if Hogwarts is really the same as in the movie. I don't know which house I will be assigned to. If I am assigned to Gryffindor. Do you know if you will meet the famous Harry Potter? Harry Potter. Harry. What? Fuck, this year, 1991, is exactly the year Harry Potter entered school. If this is really the world of Harry Potter, then he will definitely meet Harry this year. First grade and Voldemort grab the Philosopher's Stone. Second grade Horcrux and Basilisk. The third grade was a near miss, and the only one who looked more dangerous, Sirius Black, was actually a good guy. Then fourth grade. Voldemort was resurrected with blood. Fifth grade, reuniting the Black Dead. Year 6, Year 7. Start clearing the Muggle seed in an upright manner. Muggle seeds. Tiara was 100% sure that both her parents in this life and her previous life were non-magical people. Tiara can be said to be the purest Muggle breed. It couldn't be purer. Thinking of this, Tiara rolled over and got out of bed with a jerk, and sat down at the desk again. Still have to learn, these broken knowledge still have to be learned. Tiara picked up the pen again, wrote and drew on another blank parchment, and continued to build the second layer of spiritual walls. This is a kind of magic that Merlin researched in his later years that can block the erosion of the outer gods. The moment when he used Harris's pharmacy to enhance his spiritual power, he engraved this magic configuration into the spiritual dimension. This spiritual wall has a total of 7 layers. Tiara has completed the analysis of the first layer of the wall before drinking the Harris potion. The first layer to the third layer can only gradually deepen the connection between Tiara's spiritual latitude and spiritual latitude. Strengthen your control over your magic. The fourth to sixth layers can increase the spiritual dimension, that is, the accumulation of magic power. The seventh layer needs the help of an old ruler to make a qualitative change in its own spiritual dimension and spiritual dimension. As for the construction of the magic model, according to Merlin's notes and the description in the Necronomicon Principles of Black Magic, the essence of magic is dimension. Three-dimensionality in the physical sense is the direction of space. And the three-dimensional in the sense of magic is the physical dimension, the spiritual dimension and the spiritual dimension. The physical dimension is the direction of length, width, height, and space in traditional physics. The spiritual dimension is the source of the wizard's magic power, which is what Hogwarts calls the magical talent, and the spiritual root of the cultivator. The spiritual dimension is the essence of all intelligent life thinking. Wizards are three-dimensional creatures that exist simultaneously in the physical, spiritual, and spiritual dimensions. The three dimensions of matter, spirituality, and spirit are interrelated and affect each other. The use of magic by wizards generally requires the assistance of wands and spells. The magic wand is the fusion product of the material dimension and the spiritual dimension, which can help the wizard to stabilize the magic and release the power of the spiritual dimension more easily. And spells are simplified models of spells. Any kind of magic that exists today is simplified from ancient ritual magic. And everything that ritual magic does in the material dimension, such as jumping to gods, stacking rocks, lighting bonfires, and even blood sacrifices, is to build a spell model in the material world, and then mobilize the power of the spiritual dimension. These rituals have been simplified step by step, and now, most of the magic has become the point where magic can be simply released by simply chanting a spell and a wand that can communicate with the spiritual dimension. Of course, neither spells nor wands are necessary. As long as the wizard can construct a magic model with an accurate spiritual dimension, the spell can be cast without chanting spells. While other wizards chose to use long and complicated ancient runes, Merlin chose a simpler method of construction: mathematics. Merlin lived rationally on Earth for more than 700 years, from the beginning of the 11th century to the end of the 18th century. During this long period of vitality, Merlin met a genius named Newton. Since then, Merlin has changed all magic configurations to multivariate calculus. Fortunately, Tiara was a science student in her previous life. Because of the postgraduate entrance examination, she did not forget all the high numbers, and because of the limitations of Merlin's ancient thinking, all the magic configurations he gave were only some basic calculus configurations. With a bit of a simplified version of the ancient rune spells, the current learning is not too difficult for Tiara. In the past few years, Tiara was not all used to build the first layer of the spiritual wall. While studying Merlin's notes, she also tried to build several small magic spell models, such as flashing spells, fire spells, repairing spells, and of course there is a floating spell that he uses to channel magic. In the process of constructing these little magic spells, Tiara also further deepened her understanding of the entire three-dimensional theory of magic. After all, although there are Merlin's notes, but due to the era he lived in, many descriptions made Tiara ignorant. Although there are many books in this library, Tiara dared not understand. I have only read the Necronomicon chapter on the principles of black magic and the general chapter on alchemy. According to the description in the black magic chapter of the Necronomicon, the latitude of a creature is not completely unchangeable. Two-dimensional creatures can evolve into three-dimensional creatures, and three-dimensional creatures can also evolve into four-dimensional creatures by acquiring the coordinates of the divine latitude. The muggle in the wizard's mouth is the kind of two-dimensional creature that only exists in the physical dimension and the spiritual dimension. It lacks a source of mana and a spiritual dimension that can affect both at the same time, so muggles cannot use magic. Blame this kind of magical creature that only exists in the spiritual dimension and the spiritual dimension. But Dementors can in turn absorb muggle souls through their spiritual dimension. It is also very simple for muggles to obtain magic power. They only need to build a magic configuration in both the physical dimension and the spiritual dimension, and achieve the resonance of the spiritual dimension with a mysterious existence, and then the spiritual dimension can be obtained by connecting with the spirit. This mysterious being can be a powerful demon, a pagan god, an extraordinary wizard, or even a crazy outer god. Of course, this kind of spiritual connection is extremely dangerous. Powerful demons will take the opportunity to occupy your body and descend to the physical latitude. Pagan gods and wizards will turn you into a puppet, and outer gods. Tiara has already experienced it, and the little finger of her left hand still feels empty. Tiara even suspected that she might be a muggle at all, and she obtained the spiritual dimension only by connecting with the spirit behind the secret book of Suanjun 7 chapters. After all, he never received an admission letter from a magic academy in his last life, and there is nothing unusual in his memory in this life, such as an explosion of magic power. 2 days later, Tiara received a reply. This time, it was an owl with bright grey fur. It flew in and dropped the letter before flying away. Dear Mr. Wu, we are very pleased to receive your reply, and we sincerely welcome you to join us. I believe you will spend an unforgettable and happy 7 years at Hogwarts. We have already made arrangements for the situation you are talking about. Our lovely gamekeeper, Rubus Hagrid, will arrive at your old town loft on the evening of July 31st or in the early hours of August 1st to take you to the wonderful in the wizarding world. There may be a young wizard of the same age as you. Sincerely, Deputy Principal Minerva McGonagall, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. P.S. Mr. Hagrid is a tall but kind-hearted, furry gentleman. Please don't be afraid. I wish you a good time together. Hagrid? Shouldn't the little wizard with him be Harry Potter? Well, it should be. On July 31st, 1991, Harry Potter's 11th birthday, Hagrid would bring a cake to Harry. By the way, he would punish the cousin of the Dursleys who had been bullying Harry. Then Hagrid will take Harry to the Leaky Cauldron in London, enter Diagon Alley through the back wall of the bar to buy magic supplies, and take away the Sorcerer's Stone stored in Gringotts by the way. Sorcerer's Stone. Tiara remembered the half-finished Sorcerer's Stone that Merlin had left in the library, and wondered if there would be any difference between the two. But there are still 2 months, you have to prepare well, although the first 4 grades are not dangerous, but nothing is absolute, the most dangerous is the 2nd grade, Basilisk, Mirror, Rooster, Realgar. If you can buy incendiary bombs, sulfur bombs, and smoke bombs are even better. Tiara thought silently, Voldemort in the first year is fine, as long as he doesn't wander around with the protagonist group, there is basically no danger, but the Basilisk is not necessarily yes, it is an indiscriminate slaughter of Muggle species. Although none of them died in the original plot, it does not mean that he is as lucky as those few. Thank you, Merlin. Tiara said sincerely. Tiara returned to the library the day she received her Hogwarts acceptance letter and copied down the hyper-clay tablets Merlin had collected. Because it is written on clay tablets, there is not much content on it, only the learning method of Parseltongue and the cultivation techniques of basilisks, as well as some imperfect magic and curses created in the process of Hyper's experiments. There is also half of the clay tablet because it was broken and severely worn, and Tiara couldn't recognize the information on it. Even Merlin's notes didn't have any records of this part, only that it was some kind of large-scale magical ceremony. In addition to certain magical skills and language talent, the learning of Parseltongue also requires the cooperation of potions. Not to mention magical skills and language talent, after being blessed with knowledge of the great race of Yith. Only the words he has come into contact with he can read the language synchronously. The pronunciation of Parseltongue itself is based on a variant of Ancient Greek. Tiara has learned Ancient Greek after touching the Hyper Slate. Although it is not yet proficient, it is used for me to learn Parseltongue. Still enough. The rest is a potion called Hydra Poison. Hydra Poison, as the name suggests, is poison, but it is not fatal. It is a byproduct of Hydra's research on the blood magic spell. It will only turn the user into a human-shaped beast within 24 hours. Taking the snake gallbladder together, this poison will only make the user dumb for a few months. After a few months, with proper study and practice, he can initially master Parseltongue. Most of the herbal raw materials in Hydra Poison are found in Merlin's garden. This is what he has confirmed by climbing out of the pyramid in the past 2 days. Even if the desert thorn flowers, fairy wings, grimace swan chrysalis, the skin of the African tree snake and the key parts are missing, the silver shell of the feathered snake should be available in ordinary potions. The set of hardcover printed magic textbooks that Merlin had collected had already been turned over by Tiara, and after reading the Hyper Slate, she had already read through the books in Living Hell Decoction, Compound Decoction. I saw these kinds of ingredients in the well-known potion formulas such as Nimigus Potion, and they are not particularly precious things. The only problem is the snake gall of the scorpion snake. In the 1645 edition of the Mysterious Creatures Manual, this snake has been hunted and killed to the point of being endangered because of its remarkable and powerful detoxification effect. It's best to learn Parseltongue, but if you can't learn it, Tiara has to think about the items he listed before. Among them, the Realgar Mirror Rooster, needless to say. The smoke bomb can block the sight of the basilisk, and take the opportunity to escape at the same time. According to the setting in the movie, the basilisk's sense of smell does not seem to be very good. As long as the sight is blocked, the probability of his escape is still greatly increased. Incendiary bombs can instantly generate high temperatures. According to the description of the Hyper Slate, the basilisk is also afraid of flames in its infancy, in addition to being afraid of attacking calls. It was no longer sensitive, and Tiara guessed that this might be because with the thickening of the basilisk's scales, the temperature of ordinary flames could hardly affect his nervous system through the thick leather armor. But the incendiary bombs are different. The aluminothermic agent can reach a high temperature of 3000 degrees in an instant, which is enough to burn steel. Not to mention the Fulcient blood basilisk, even if it is not fatal because of the characteristics of magical creatures, it can also cause damage to the basilisk. There must be obstacles, which can give him time to escape. It is not difficult to configure the incendiary bomb, and even Tierra has tried it a few times. Of course, it is not used to smash people, but has used matches to ignite aluminum powder and iron dioxide in the laboratory, in response to the school policy, popularize chemistry experiments to high school and junior high school students around the university. Iron dioxide, aluminum powder, and magnesium rods for ignition are put into glass bottles, but it is difficult to control the detonation time for magnesium rods to ignite. Therefore, it is necessary to use a basic sulfur bomb mixed with sulfur, saltpeter, and carbon powder, and a wet towel soaked with accelerant as a lead. Tie a piece, and once you encounter a basilisk, ignite it and throw it together, generating heat that can melt metal. Although Tierra can be regarded as a wizard now, including the magic of cursing worms, compared to her peers, Tierra has a lot of self-preservation. But Tierra was a science student in his previous life, and he was accustomed to using technological thinking to solve problems when he encountered problems. Or in other words, when facing unknown dangers, Tierra will feel safe only when she holds the power of technology in her hands. This is a concept that has been accumulated for decades in the past life, and it cannot be reversed by mastering a few magics in a short period of time. 2 months passed quickly. To prepare for the upcoming thrilling Hogwarts life, Tierra quit her job as a receptionist at a Chinese restaurant. The reason is to tell the truth. In the face of the kind-hearted couple who helped her when she was in the most difficult time, Tierra couldn't open her mouth, so she just told the truth. It's just a bit of a struggle to explain, even though Tierra showed the couple that Hogwarts admission letter and her ability to float spells, flash spells, fire spells, that kind Chinese aunt and honest Chinese man. Don't worry, he insisted on accompany Tierra to meet Hagrid, the gamekeeper, on July 31st. However, Tierra rejected him righteously. Hagrid was a half-giant, nearly 3 meters tall, with a furry body like a big brown bear. At first, seeing Tierra's display of the suspended fire curse scared them out of a heart attack, but they were saved by Tierra's ability to curse the worm. If Hagrid, like a big kid, does something outrageous, Tierra has to save him again. Although Tierra rejected the couple's suggestion, it still gave him a very warm feeling. In fact, Tierra knows the thoughts of the Chinese couple. The poor couple's child died prematurely. After getting along for the past few years, Tierra has been regarded as her own child. Respectful but distant, the couple may have made a formal request to adopt him. But in Tierra's heart, his parents were still alive, in another parallel world. A quick and heavy knock came from the first floor of the small building. Looking down from the window of the attic where Tierra was sitting, I could see a furry giant and a thin little boy. "Hello, is there anyone? I'm Hagrid, the gamekeeper at Hogwarts. Is Tierra Wu at home? Please wait a moment." Tierra shouted from the attic, and then ran downstairs quickly. "Hello, you must be Tierra Witch, right? I'm Rubus Hagrid, the gamekeeper at Hogwarts, this little wizard, Harry Potter, your classmate." Grid said angrily, and at the same time turned his body to reveal a Harry Potter following him. "Hello Hagrid, hello Harry," said me. Tierra stepped forward and hugged Hagrid, then hugged Harry again. Although Hagrid was a gamekeeper, he didn't have any odor on his body. Instead, he smelled of leather, grass, and gasoline. And Harry smelled of licorice, cake, and a little sweat. Harry didn't seem to be used to this kind of hug. He seemed to stiffen when he made physical contact with Tierra, but he still hugged back mechanically. After feeling Harry's discomfort, Tierra silently let go of the hug. He looked at Harry carefully. Harry looks a lot like Daniel Radcliffe in the movie, but is thinner and shorter than he is in the movie, wearing long sleeves and canvas pants that have been worn out, and his hair is messy like a weed in general. The glasses on the bridge of the nose are also a little twisted, as if they are often hit. Hello, Tiara, I was supposed to take you to Diagon Alley to do some shopping, but it's a little late, can you let us stay for one night? I don't need a bed, a big enough one, just empty space. I'm sorry, I was going to take you to Diagon Alley this afternoon, but Uncle Harry moved to an island, and it's really hard to find, so it's delayed until now. No problem. Tiara replied happily. He had already expected this situation. Whether in the movie or in the novel, Hagrid took Harry away in the middle of the night, and Diagon Alley was open during the day, so Hagrid and Harry would definitely find a way to sleep outside for the night. Normally, they should spend their time on the sofa at Disley's house or in the guest room of the Leaky Cauldron, but because there was another Tiara to pick up, Hagrid would most likely open the night. Anyway, in the cognition of most wizards, a Muggle home where no one lives is equal to a free hotel. After Tiara agreed, Hagrid took Harry into Tiara's small building on his own. Harry was still feeling a little reserved, but Hagrid completely made this place his home. With a wave of the pink umbrella in his hand, he lit the fireplace on the first floor, and took off the wet fur coat and spread it on the ground in front of the fireplace. I'll sleep here. Can you find a bed for Harry? Poor little Harry has been sleeping on the sofa at the Disleys for days. No problem. Tiara took Harry's hand and said, You can sleep with me, my bed is in the attic, it's big. But, will this affect you? Said a little awkwardly. Harry has always lived in the shadow of his cousin Disley, since he has had such close contact with people outside of being bullied. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com has never received any kindness from peers, which makes Harry feel awkward and warm at the same time. My bed is very big. Tiara continued to release kindness. You don't have to worry about affecting me. I grew up in an orphanage, my parents were killed by bad people, and children of the same age as me have been bullying the orphanage. I'm glad to meet a friend like you. We're friends, right? Me too. Harry almost shouted. The formality and rustiness of the first meeting seemed to disappear at once. Facing this boy whose experience was very similar to his own, Harry felt a certain moving resonance. If Harry was Tiara, he would know that this kind of emotion is called friendship empathy. In unfamiliar environments, people are more inclined to choose to make friends with people who have similar experiences to themselves, and building the initial topic based on their own common experiences helps to break the awkward atmosphere at the first meeting. This kind of empathy for making friends is useless in adult social situations, because even if there is no common topic between adults, an embarrassing conversation can come up. But this friendship empathy works very well for children. This is a little skill that Tiara summed up in the process of being an intern teacher and taking relatives and children. The empathy built by similar experiences helps to draw the distance between her and her children. Now Harry is a child who lacks love. It should be said that he is a rich child who lacks love. Although it is a bit embarrassing to say, Tiara is really short of money. Whether it is the follow-up Harris Pharmacy, Hydra poison, and helicopter gallbladder, they all need certain financial support. Merlin was on top. At this time, he met the lonely, poor, and helpless young local tyrant Potter. Ding! Tiara seemed to hear Jin Gallion's brushing voice ringing in her ears. Hey, Tiara, are you asleep? Harry, who was hiding under the duvet, gently touched Tiara who was lying beside him. No, what's wrong, Harry? Tiara replied softly. How could I be able to fall asleep with you tossing and turning beside me? Tiara said silently in her heart. No, it's nothing, I just can't sleep. I didn't disturb you, did I? It's okay, Harry, I can't sleep either. Tiara replied. It's unbelievable. It's like a dream. I never imagined that there really exists magic in the world, and there is a magic school. Harry sighed. Hey, it's like a dream, I'm still very moved after a long time of waking up. Tiara teased, but unfortunately Harry didn't understand this advanced meme. By the way, Harry, you don't have to speak so quietly, Hagrid lives on the first floor, we're in the attic, you can say as loudly as you want, it won't bother Hagrid. Oh, okay. Harry's voice improved a lot, but it was still soft, like a kitten's meowing. Habits developed over the years of being under the control of others are not so easily reversed, and although Harry has moved away from the closet of his uncle's house, he is still the one who lives in the Gringotts vault until he sees the piles of gallons in the Gringotts vault. Little boy in the closet. Faced with Tiara, who had a similar experience, Harry quickly reconciled, and poured everything he had just learned from Hagrid about the magical world and his parents to Tiara like beans. And Harry's miserable life at his aunt and uncle's house for the past decade. Although Tiara already knew about these situations through the Harry Potter series of books and movies, she still seemed to be cooperative and interested. There are a lot of things to buy in the admission letter. Tiara sighed. Yes, Hagrid will take us to buy tomorrow morning, I can't wait. Harry said excitedly. Harry, are you rich? Money, money. I don't have it. Harry said instantly with a sullen face, Uncle Disley will definitely not give me money to go to magic school. Don't worry about Harry. After that, Tiara jumped out of bed, smeared and opened the third drawer of her desk, took out an old cowhide bag, and placed it in front of Harry through the moonlight from the skylight. What's this? Harry flipped and heard the sound of metal crashing inside. Money. Tiara said as she opened the cowhide bag and poured out a dozen banknotes neatly arranged according to the denominations from small to large, as well as a few golden coins. Harry's eyes seemed to straighten, he had never seen so much money in his life, whether it was the thick dozen bills or those old but golden coins. Tiara, this is money, Harry, this is the money I saved from working after I ran out of the orphanage at the age of 6, Tiara said. The banknotes in the bag were about £1,100, a thick bundle of pounds of 10, 20, and 50 denominations. It was the money he had saved over the years in addition to working in restaurants and performing magic on the street. The money was originally saved for airfare after he was 12 years old, when he reached the age when he could fly alone. If this world is a parallel world to the world he has traveled through, he still has a large number of relatives in his motherland and a set of real estate. Even if he goes back to eat 100 restaurants, it is better than wandering in a foreign country. But an acceptance letter from Hogwarts gave him another option. I hope the money will cover our tuition fees, Tiara said. Wait, Tiara, our tuition? Harry asked in shock. Yes, Harry, our tuition, if you don't have money, I can help you pay for it. I have some savings from working outside these years, It's much better than your situation, if it's not enough. If it's not enough, I have to. These gold coins have been sold. Tiara had a sad expression on her face, and then said reluctantly, these gold coins are the only relics my parents left me. Oh, no, Tiara, I can't ask for this money. This money? Harry quickly refused. No, Harry, we're friends, aren't we? Tiara said. Friends should help each other. But Tiara, this is too much, I can't afford it. No, you can afford it, Tiara said silently in her heart. I don't want you to pay it back. Tiara said, I wanted to have a good friend since I was a child, from an orphanage. Then Tiara added fuel to her tragic experience. She lost her father and mother when she was young, was bullied in the orphanage, and managed to escape to the streets. The dog grabbed the food until it met a kind Chinese aunt. Of course, the middle part of the experience was made up. Although Tiara was only 6 years old when she escaped from the orphanage, Tiara, relying on the thinking of adults, got along well in the small group of street children. Ukansha.com What is hungry and full, and what is eaten with wild dogs does not exist at all. In fact, At that time, Tiara had initially gathered more than a dozen street children in London to form an organised and disciplined small group to help gangsters and hooligans on the streets of London's Old City and Lower City to pass messages or carry contraband. Occasionally there are premeditated groups of fraud or theft. Forced by life, when he could not find a job for the first 2 months, Tiara was smoothed out of all the edges and corners that belonged to a scholar in his previous life. This change of abandoning his conscience was the only one in Tiara's wandering career. A rather difficult experience. But this only comes from mental torment and self-criticism, but from material suffering. Those months of homeless life made Tiara have many dark thoughts in her heart. Only children will feel sorry for themselves because of their past sad experiences. Adults should learn to use the compassion of others to earn enough benefits. Harry didn't accept Tiara's pounds and gold coins in the end, but Tiara's open-hearted help was enough to make Harry grateful, and his nose was still twitching in bed at night. It was obvious that Harry was wrapped, silently crying in the quilt. This gave Tiara a faint sense of guilt. He didn't really want to help Harry, even if Harry was the protagonist of his favorite series of movies and novels in his last life, he couldn't let him help him without reservation. What Tiara wanted was Harry's help. Not only from Harry's money, but also from his connections, his fame. In his previous life, when he read those immortal novels, the 4 elements of wealth and law are indispensable. The same goes for learning magic. Get up, kids, we have a lot to buy today. Hagrid roared wildly from the closet on the first floor, through the thick 2-story floor, into Tiara and Harry's ears. Harry sat up sleepily, perhaps because of the excitement of stepping into the wizarding world, perhaps because of the happiness of having a good friend like Tiara. Harry tossed and turned until 2 or 3 o'clock last night. So when he was woken up by Hagrid's piercing voice, it felt a little unreal. As if everything that happened yesterday was a dream, in which his parents are no longer losers who have accomplished nothing, but heroes of the magical world against the forces of evil, and friends of his parents appear on his 11th birthday, not only brought him his first sweet birthday cake, and took him away from the Dursleys to make his first friend. God, if this is a dream, please don't wake me up. Harry prayed silently and opened his eyes. The morning sun shines in through the skylight of the attic, and the black-haired, dark-eyed boy sits at the old wooden table and writes and draws. Seemingly aware of Harry's gaze, Tiara looked up from the pile of mathematical formulas on the table. Are you up? Tiara smiled at Harry, revealing 2 pointed little tiger teeth, reminding Harry of the little fox he saw at the zoo on Dudley Dursley's birthday. He smiled, with a sly, lovely smile. Get dressed and wash up. Tiara said, today we're going to Diagon Alley. It was not until Tiara threw the clothes to Harry that Harry realized that the clothes in his hands were not the ones that were full of holes and dust when he came, but a clean one. Clothes he had never seen before. I woke up early today, and I have nothing to do, so I'll wash your clothes for you. Tiara said with a smile, your suit is still dry, so put on mine first. Tiara and Harry are both 11 years old. Because they work in a Chinese restaurant, compared to Harry, Tiara has no worries about eating and drinking, and under the special care of the proprietress, Tiara even eats a little overnutrition, so I mentioned it. Not only was Yella half a head taller than Harry, she was also a bit stronger than Harry, and Harry had no problem wearing his clothes. Harry squeezed Lydia's clean clothes with some soapy fragrance, and quickly put a set on his head. Today is a big day for Harry. If there is a choice, he doesn't want to wear a suit full of holes into the magical world. Harry and Tiara are taken to the Leaky Cauldron by Hagrid, all dressed. It was a dingy, cramped bar, sandwiched between a huge bookstore and a record store on the other side, 2 blocks from Tiara's attic, and not at all if Hagrid hadn't pointed it out. Someone noticed such a shabby and small bar. In fact, Tiara passed by the door of this bar many times, and every day from the Chinese restaurant where he worked, he had to pass this street to walk back to his attic in the old city. Every time she passed by, Tiara noticed only the bookstore and record store on either side, never the leaky cauldron between the two buildings. It's hard for the average person to notice. Hagrid blinked at Tiara. Unless someone brings a little wizard and muggle here for the first time, they won't be able to see the leaky cauldron, let alone go in. Before Harry and Tiara could speak, Hagrid was pushed into the leaky cauldron. As a place that was famous both in the wizarding world and in Tiara's previous life, it was too dark and dirty, far more dirty than the movies showed. Tiara felt that a third-rate restaurant in any third-tier city in China was better than a third-rate restaurant in China. This is to be clean. In the leaky cauldron, several old women were sitting in the corner drinking sherry with small glasses, and one of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was chatting with a bar owner with almost stripped hair and a shriveled walnut. As soon as they entered the door, their chattering stopped suddenly. Everyone here seemed to know Hagrid, and they smiled, waved, and whistled at him. Old rules? Hagrid. A hunchbacked man sitting at the counter wiped his glass over and looked at Hagrid. Oh, no, Tom, I'd love to have a drink, but I'm doing errands for Hogwarts. Hagrid patted the bartender on the shoulder with his huge palm, almost knocking him down. You know, I never drink when I work, that's why Dumbledore trusts me. Hagrid said proudly. My God, said the bar owner, who turned his attention to the two little boys following Hagrid after Hagrid refused, when he saw Harry's almost emerald green studies and hidden in tousled hair. Lightning-shaped scar, he screamed like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Oh, Merlin is on, this is not. Suddenly, the leaky cauldron was silent. Oops. The bar owner seemed to realize his gaffe, and hurriedly whispered, Harry Potter, oh Merlin's beard, it's Harry Potter, what an honor. The bar owner hurried out from behind the bar, ran towards Harry, grabbed his hand, and burst into tears. Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back. Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone is looking at him. The old woman who smoked the long pipe smoked so hard that she didn't realize that the pipe was extinguished. Hagrid started to giggle, the crackling sound of the chairs falling one after another, and all the wizards in the bar came here for the sake of it, young and old, men and women, all kinds of strange. Harry was surrounded by people, and if Tiara hadn't been pulling on the cuff of Hagrid's coat, he might have been squeezed out of the circle by now. Harry had never seen such a scene. When he came back to his senses that day, Harry suddenly found himself shaking hands with the people in the leaky cauldron. I'm Cordry, Mr. Potter. I can't believe it. I finally see you. It's an honor, Mr. Potter, it's an honor. I've been looking forward to shaking hands with you, my heart is pounding. I'm so happy, Mr. Potter, I can't explain how I feel. My name is Dick. I've seen you before, Harry yelled when Dick got so excited that his hat fell. You bowed to me once in the store. He still remembers. Dick excitedly shouted to everyone present, did you hear me? Harry Potter, he remembers me. So Harry shook hands over and over again. Cordry, the wizard who was the first to shake Harry's hand, always came over and asked to shake him again. A pale young man came over, his expression was very nervous, and one of his eyes kept twitching. Professor Quirrell. Hagrid nodded slightly, as if he was saying hello. Harry, Tiara, let me introduce to you, this is Professor Quirrell, your teacher. Bo. Potter, Professor Quirrell stammered, grabbing Harry's hand, seeing you there is a kind of happiness that you reading www.yuyuganshu.com can't describe. Tiara stood next to Hagrid, noting that Quirrell was holding Harry's hand with a pair of black gloves. At this time, a strange thought suddenly flashed through Tiara's mind. If Professor Quirrell was to take off his gloves and shake Harry's hands now, would the first Harry Potter movie end prematurely? You teach a type of magic, Professor Quirrell. Black, defense against the dark arts. Professor Quirrell said vaguely, as if he thought it might be better not to mention it. You've used it, you don't need to learn it, right, Mr. Bo? Potter. Quirrell suddenly laughed nervously. You're right, are you going to buy what you need? Just in time, I too, want to buy a book about sucking vampires. But the rest wouldn't let Professor Quirrell talk to Harry endlessly. It took Harry about 10 minutes to get rid of them. In the midst of the chatter, Higra raised Tiara to Harry. It's time to go, there's still a lot to buy. Come on, Harry, don't keep Tiara waiting. The last time Cordley shook hands with Harry, Hagrid led him across the bar to the small walled patio. There is nothing here but a trash can and some weeds. Sorry Harry, Tiara, I was going to take you to the Leaky Cauldron for breakfast. They make mashed potato sandwiches so well, not even the house elves at Hogwarts can do that. Hagrid grinned at Harry and Tiara, but now we're going to go to Diagon Alley and grab a bite to eat. Well, that delicious sausage isn't sold out yet. As Hagrid spoke, he drew out his pink umbrella.